Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's your boy Meatstick89, and I'm back at it with another recording. And in this recording, we're going to talk about one of the game's most overpowered, underappreciated, undervalued Pokemon. I want to go over why it's so good and how come it is so good. And I don't want to waste your time because I'm only taking a little bit of a break from the grind. I want to get back at it and get some Stardust before Mudkip Community Day. I'm going to be maxing out quite a bit of those. So we're here to talk about Rampardos, y'all, and I want to talk about how good it really is, no matter what level you are as far as trainer level goes. I feel like there's, well, to sum it up, as I was doing my grind, I was on YouTube, I was looking for videos that covered stuff about Rampardos. You know, I needed knowledge, because I didn't have that much knowledge about this Pokemon until now. So yeah, I was on YouTube. I didn't see anything really too important as far as details about Rampardos. You know, PokeAK, he did a video, 2 videos I should say, and you know, he covered the gist of it. But we're going to take a deeper dive into this. I have 2 pages of notes. I just spent the last 90 minutes researching everything that I should have known a long time ago. But just so you guys know what kind of a Pokemon Rampardos is, it's this, right? So it's a rock-type Pokemon, straight up just a rock-type Pokemon, and it is weak to fighting, steel, ground, water, and grass. And being that it is a rock-type Pokemon, it resists flying, fire, poison, and normal type attacks. But it dishes off super effective damage to poison, normal, electric, fire, flying, ice, and bug. You know, so it does do a lot for the everyday player, and so far using mine, it's definitely increased the time to win on a lot of raids, and I'm sweeping through gyms a lot faster. And the faster you can do all of those things, the faster you can get out and do more of those things, right? So you need to be effective. So to go over its stats a little bit further, you know, Rampardos at 100% IV, completely maxed out at level 40, maxes out at 3298 CP. That's a completely maxed Rampardos that you're looking at, and she is 100% IV. I love it, absolutely. I can't get enough of it, and I definitely need to focus on more of them before they legacy something on it, right? So the stats on Rampardos are pretty important to know as well, right? It's got the 109 defensive stat, which is very low. But don't be afraid of that defensive stat, because the stamina stat on a Rampardos is amazing. It's got a 219 stamina stat. It's the 56th highest stamina stat in the game right now. And it's going to hold a lot of value once Gen 5 hits too. So it's not really going to get outshined by anything. And the attack stat is what is the most known fact about Rampardos. The attack stat on the Rampardos is 295. And for those of you guys who don't know, a 295 attack stat is the 4th highest in the game. You have Deoxys attack form with a 414 attack stat. You have Deoxys normal, it's like a 340 something attack stat. Don't quote me on Deoxys normal, but just know it's the 2nd highest attack stat. And then you have the regular simple old Mewtwo with the 300 point attack stat, and then Rampardos with the 295 attack stat. But Rampardos has the highest attack stat out of all non-legendary and non-mythical Pokemon. So it's a very strong Pokemon, right? So to sum it up, Rampardos is very well worth an investment, you know, but the only suggestion that I would have for you guys is when you figure out what Cranidos or Cranidoses you're going to evolve, make sure they're ones that you wouldn't regret and you have no problem maxing out. Yeah, that's a big deal, Fly. Because if you don't max these things out, they do fall pretty quick, right? They faint out fairly quickly when they're lightly powered up or not powered up at all. So focus on maxing them out. But I want to get into the important stuff, the stuff that realistically no one's talking about. and it's neutral DPS. And the reason why neutral DPS is so important is because when you are battling gyms, you're trying to take down gyms, chances are you're not stacking a battle party to fit a specific gym. Like, you're not going to use a Machamp against a Blissey and then the next thing in the gym is like an Executor, and then you're going to switch out to either a Dragon or a Fire type. That's not going to happen. You're just going to try to beat it out and beat it out. So that's why neutral DPS is so important. And it's also very important in raid situations as well. So neutral DPS is damage that is given. It's not resisted and it's not super effective. It's just damage. And DPS is damage per second. And for those of you guys who don't really know too much on DPS, you need to produce a certain amount of DPS to overcome raids and beat out gyms. Raids, you're going against the clock. Taking down gyms, you're going against the clock. So you need to have a good or a fair amount of DPS in order to be successful in taking gyms or soloing raids. Or even two-manning, trioing, quad beating, however you want to say it. So I want to talk about the top numbers of neutral DPS. So Deoxys attack form, Deoxys normal form, they have the top 1 through 7 neutral DPS, on lock. There's nothing coming out that's going to beat it. They got the 2 highest attack stats in the game, so realistically, they're just DPS kings. They have like next to nothing for TDO, which is total damage output, so how much damage you're dishing out before you faint out. Now the 8th highest neutral DPS goes to Dragon Tail Outrage Rayquaza, which is awesome. I have a video that is going to be coming out pretty quick here about the importance of dragons, so stay tuned for that. But the 9th highest neutral DPS goes to Rampardos, and the moveset that gives it that is Smackdown and Rock Slide. So in a quick note, Rampardos can learn Smackdown and Zen Headbutt for fast moves. It learns Rock Slide, Outrage, and Flamethrower for the charge moves. Interestingly enough, with the charge moves, they're all 2-bar charge moves, which makes it even more valuable in the meta. So as with looking at neutral DPS, I want to go over something that I found that definitely took my interest and piqued it, right? So Smackdown and Rock Slide on Rampardos is the game's 9th highest neutral DPS. It's massive. Let me check the notes right quick, because I had to write it down, right? So, yeah, with Smackdown and Rock Slide, Rampardos is giving off an 18.413 DPS. Now, Deoxys attack form with the 414 attack stat with Zen Headbutt and Dark Pulse is doing 21.856, DPS. So if you're looking at it on a quick note, it's a 3-point deficit, So you have the game's highest attack stat Pokemon, beating it by like almost 200, and it's pretty much hanging in there. But what's interesting about Rampardos, even though it's a little squishy, it gives off double, if not almost triple, the total damage output as far as the Deoxys forms go. Now here's what's interesting, right? So I want to talk about some stuff, because we know Rampardos is the #1 rock type attacking Pokemon in the game. And when Gen 5 comes out, it's still going to be the #1 rock type Pokemon. There's this one Pokemon, Achops, that's rock flying type that could come close to it as far as performance, but at the end of the day, it has a 3-point less attack stat. So it's not going to be able to beat it unless they do a special move for it, and I doubt that. Now I want to talk about neutral DPS as far as using a Smackdown Outrage Rampardos, because I know a lot of people are having a hard time coming across TMs. So as far as neutral DPS goes, a Rampardos with Smackdown and Outrage has a neutral DPS of 17.229. It's a really good neutral DPS. So you have Pokemon like Dragonite with Dragon Tail and Outrage, and it has a 17.229 neutral DPS. The thing you have to realize about Dragonite with double dragon moves is Dragonite receives a stab benefit. And what I mean by stab is it's a same type attack bonus. So it gets an extra 20% damage kicked into the overall factor. So I know a lot of people are out there focusing on Gibbles, right? I know I am. It's not a good dragon type, it's a good ground type. But as far as the neutral DPS goes, wow, I just really dropped that paper. Bear with me, guys. This is where I live, y'all. Little small town USA, right? Over here being a klutz, dropping my notes. All right, we're back. Somewhat back, right? Dust my hands off. I don't want to get my nice new phone dirty. Yeah, so as we're looking at Garchomp, Garchomp with Dragon Tail and Outrage, as far as neutral DPS goes, it's dishing off a 17.19 neutral DPS. So Rampardos with Smackdown and Outrage, it receives no stab bonus from Outrage. It is giving off more neutral DPS than a double dragon move Garchomp. I think that's incredible, especially considering the fact that Garchomp is a very important pseudo-legendary dragon with double dragon moves. Rampardos not getting stab off of Outrage, doing more DPS. It's pretty important. I just wanted to cover that one right quick. But interestingly enough, you don't have to use your Rampardos as straight up just a rock type Pokemon. It also learns Flamethrower. Oh, just to touch on Outrage on your Rampardos, in windy weather, the damage that it would produce only gets higher because the weather coming into place gives dragon type moves a boost when it's windy weather. So in windy weather, Rampardos with Smackdown and Outrage is a pretty massive neutral DPS dishing Pokemon. So don't get too hung up on just using your dragons, right? Because there's going to be times where dragons are weak to dragons and you need dragon damage. You can revert back to your Rampardos with Outrage, and sure enough, you'll be able to overcome some DPS obstacles. Now Rampardos though is a fire type attacker because it learns Flamethrower, a 2-bar damage charge move. Ooh, look at the race cars. Look at the race cars, guys. I think it's a race weekend. 65 Mustang. Oh, I'd kill for one of them again. So Rampardos with Smackdown and Flamethrower, as far as neutral DPS goes, it is kicking off 16.648 DPS. So that's pretty high, right? Because you have Pokemon Mewtwo. Mewtwo has a 300-point attack stat, 5 points higher than Rampardos. So Mewtwo with Confusion and Flamethrower does 16.528 neutral DPS. So that's Mewtwo with Flamethrower. Rampardos with Flamethrower gives off more neutral DPS. It doesn't really get much better than that, right? And then just to put it even to more perspective, Moltres, guys, Moltres. So it used to be the #1 fire type attacking Pokemon until Blaziken learned Blast Burn. Moltres, a Pokemon that requires rare candy. You have to spend money on raid passes to get them. You can't even get them at this point in time unless you trade. But check this out. Moltres with Fire Spin and Overheat. That's Moltres' #1 moveset. So having Fire Spin and Overheat, Moltres will kick off 16.273 neutral DPS. Once again, Rampardos with Smackdown, Flamethrower kicking off 16.648 neutral DPS is giving off more neutral DPS than double stab, double fire Moltres. Guys, that is one wild statistic, right? We're just talking neutral DPS. Obviously, a fire type Pokemon are the #1 Pokemon to use in raids. Moltres will be the best to use because it does receive stab from fire type moves and it learns a fire fast and fire charge. So I don't want to get you hung up on that. It's not a better fire type Pokemon. I'm just comparing it apples to apples with fire charge moves. Rampardos gives off more neutral DPS than double fire Moltres. Oh, and Blaziken with Blaze Kick. So Blaziken with Fire Spin and Blaze Kick does 16.084 DPS. Neutral DPS. So Rampardos even beats that out as far as neutral DPS. And it receives 0 stab from Flamethrower. So I just wanted to cover that right quick. But this is the one that got me. And I know when we're talking apples to apples, Pokemon that learn a fast and a charge of its typing, better in a raid situation, but as far as a neutral situation goes, check this out. Rampardos with Zen Headbutt receives 0 stab off Zen Headbutt. It's a Psychic type fast move, and Rampardos is Rock. But Rampardos with Zen Headbutt for a fast move and Rock Slide for the charge move dishes off 17.021 neutral DPS. It's a massive, massive neutral DPS, because you got to revert back to looking at it like Dragon Tail Outrage Dragonite's only kicking off 17.22, and then you have a Pokemon that has 0 stab benefit off of its fast move doing 17.021 DPS. It's a really it's a massive attacking Pokemon. You can use it for more than just Rock. But check that out, right? So you have Mewtwo, the game's #1 Psychic type Pokemon. Mewtwo with Confusion and Psychic gives off 16.555 neutral DPS. Rampardos with Zen Headbutt and Rock Slide is kicking off 17.021 neutral DPS. Now, I'm not saying Rampardos is the better Psychic type Pokemon. I'm just saying Rampardos having a Psychic type fast move, receiving no stab, and Rock Slide is giving more neutral DPS than double Psychic Mewtwo. Mewtwo has a 300-point attack stat, 5 points more than Rampardos. Rampardos is still giving more neutral DPS. That's impressive. Azelf with Confusion and Future Sight giving off 16.275 neutral DPS. Rampardos gives off more neutral DPS than Pokemon of its typing. So what I mean by that is, if you have Rampardos with Rock attacks, it's giving off more neutral DPS than any other Rock type Pokemon in the game. And then you have Rampardos with Flamethrower and Outrage, and it's giving off more neutral DPS than legendaries of those typings. Guys, it's much more than just the #1 Rock type Pokemon. You know, I don't want to bore you guys with numbers and statistics, but you know, realistically, just know the top 30 highest neutral DPS standpoints. So we're talking about place, like first place, second place, third place. Rampardos with all of its potential move sets, doesn't matter the fast move, doesn't matter the charge moves, it is always amongst the highest neutral DPS Pokemon to use. So with those numbers, you know, I'm not saying that it's the better Pokemon to use. So like if you have a raid boss you're going against where fire is the #1 counter, Flamethrower Rampardos isn't your #1 Pokemon to use, but it's not your worst one to use either. It has such a massive neutral DPS. You will always find Rampardos on the top 20 counters list in Pokebattler for basically every raid that it doesn't take super effective damage from. And the reason being is because of its attack stat. So in a closing note, what I wanted to go over realistically with Rampardos as I start walking for my grind is this. Rampardos is much more than just a Rock type Pokemon. What I mean by that is you can use it in a couple of different weather situations. You can use it in windy weather. Give it Zen Headbutt and Outrage and watch the potential that it can give for you. You can use it in sunny or clear weather. Watch what it does with Flamethrower. You can use it in partly cloudy weather and then watch what it does for you in that kind of weather. It's just such a high attack stat, and it's so underappreciated. It's so overlooked. And I think people ought to know more about this Pokemon. You know, so at the end of the day, here's what I would say to you guys is, we don't know if it would get a community day. It would be one hell of a unique community day because it only has one evolution. Whoa. Got some race cars. But yeah, so at the end of the day, a closing note is this. Cranidos is extremely rare, so evolve with caution. What I mean by that is, don't evolve a bad IV Cranidos just because you want to have the best rock-type Pokemon. Evolve your Cranidos because they have good IVs. The IV stat that you really want to emphasize is you want its best IV to be in the defense. With a 295 attack stat, a 0% IV attack stat, Rampardos still kicks off more damage than 100% IV completely max Smackdown Stone Edge Tyranitar. It's not about the attack, it's about the defense. But in a closing note, focus on putting your Cranidos as a buddy. It's not going to be outperformed by anything in Gen 5, and it's definitely not going to be outperformed by anything in Gen 6. So we don't know if it's going to have a community day. It is a 10K egg hatch, but it's only a 2-stage evolution Pokemon. My advice to you guys would be this, is evolve 1 or 2 of them, max out 1 or 2 of them, because by the time it receives a community day, you will already replenish the candies that you needed to evolve those Cranidos into Rampardos. And during a community day, you'll be able to replenish them on that actual date. So we don't know what would happen. There realistically isn't anything that Niantic could give it that's in the game data right now that would improve what it can do. Honestly, it would just offer more available options with whatever move they would give it. But I don't think it's going to receive a community day. But I do think that we will be able to get these shiny Cranidos pretty soon. So stay tuned with that. But on a closing note, thank you guys for staying tuned, and I hope it helped. Remember, Rampardos, the most overlooked, highest neutral DPS Pokemon in the game. What are you going to do with it? That's what I would say for a closing question. But hey, get out there and grind, guys. Thanks for staying in. Later.